kind of roughly into 3 sections, and you have this on your handout. Incidentally, if you don't have a handout, that is on our website, and so you'll be able to access it. It's on there now, isn't it?
No.
No, it will be. It will be.
This
Okay.
afternoon.
Right, this afternoon. So, 3 sections then. In the first section, we're going to show you some examples of types of pictures. Okay? In the second section, we're going to talk about how different types of pictures lend themselves to language teaching. And we're going to talk about efficiency, ways in which pictures can be supportive, how they're memorable and meaningful. So I'm not going to describe or explain what we mean by those terms now. We'll do that as we go along. And then finally, in the third section, we're going to talk about how pictures can be useful for learning, and mentioning terms like how they're motivating, how they're personal, how they're communicative, and how they self-adjust. Again, we'll explain those terms as we come to them. Okay? So,
First part.
Section A. Okay, so we're going to show you 5 types of pictures now. Excuse me. And as we do, we'll mention some types of tasks that you can use with these types of pictures. And then in B and C, in fact, we'll talk more about the tasks. Okay? The first kind of picture, single frame picture. Okay? Now, you can get these from a variety of sources. Okay? Obviously, works of art, film stills, okay? And they are particularly useful in that you've got your picture. Now what you can do is to write a text that accompanies that picture, let's say describing it. Now the text might be describing the picture as it is, and you can get your students to identify things that are being described, or it could be a text which has kind of contradictions in it. It doesn't quite describe what's in the picture. Okay? So then you can get your students to spot the contradictions. Very easy activity, very quick to design. So you can do that. You can either record yourself or record somebody else reading a description, or simply get your students to read the description. So you can work on various skills simply using one single frame picture. Okay? You can also get your students, of course, to produce language related to this picture. If you have 2 similar pictures, they can describe their picture to find a difference between the 2. So picture difference is standard activity. And as Mark said before, every picture tells a story. You can use pictures for work on narrative, and we'll come back to that point a little bit later. Ooh.
The second kind of picture is what we're calling multi-frame. It's where you have various different examples of the same kind of thing. It could be faces, it could be rooms, cars, buildings, whatever. So you can make up a bank of pictures like this quite easily. For example, go into Google Images and type in portraits of women or whatever it is you're looking for. Choose the ones you want and then put them together, and you have one of these multi-frames, which are very useful in language teaching, because you can then use language to distinguish between them. For example, I describe one, you identify which one it is. Or in pair work, student A describes one, student B has to identify which one it is. The more pictures there are in the bank, the more difficult it is. If you have 20 portraits, maybe 5 of them have glasses. So if you say she's wearing glasses, you've still got to describe more and more to make the difference. You can make the pictures more similar to each other to make it more difficult, or more different from each other to make it easier. The more different they are, the easier it is to express the difference. So these are easy to find and very useful for language teaching, this kind of multi-frame image.
Okay, and our third kind of picture is a sequential picture, okay, kind of cartoon type strip. Okay, obviously there's a story here, there's something going on, so these are particularly good for working on narratives. Now, you can get your students to tell the story from the pictures. You could actually get your students to write dialogues to accompany different frames in the picture. Look at this, for example, there's a lot of action going on here, but there's no speech. Okay, so you could insert speech bubbles and get your students to continue the dialogue. Okay, what people are saying here has to make sense with what's happening in the picture and has to be coherent with what follows next, and so on. Once students have written their dialogues, they can read them out, they could do role plays. There's a lot of ways you can extend out from this to practice, to give students speaking practice. You can, of course, add an element of intrigue. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Okay?
And then there's picture pairs, which is distinct from multi-frames because the two pictures are exactly the same, but with a few differences. In this case, created by the artist. You can also make picture pairs out of two similar pictures. For example, I have a painting by Frida Kahlo showing people sitting on a bus, and another one by another artist of people sitting on a bus. So they're similar pictures, and you can use it in this way, like a picture differences activity. So you can use them, for example, for information gap. Student A has this picture, student B has this picture. They describe and find the differences. You can use it also for contextualizing grammar, maybe comparatives, or in the example we'll show later, present perfect. Picture differences are very good for contextualizing certain grammar points.
Okay, and excuse me. Finally, the fifth kind of picture, the map or the diagram. Now, these have been used since, I don't know, the beginning of time in language teaching. You can block out information and create a gap and set up per work activities, so students have got to find to fill those gaps, and they're useful, of course, for doing work on giving directions and following instructions. Okay, nothing else to say about that, really. No?
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about using pictures to support the language, the language input of the lesson, right? And we can begin by looking at something that's a bit old-fashioned, very simplified texts. You used to get these in books in the 1960s. But they're not so used anymore because A, they're not communicative, and B, they're boring. But they do have something good about them, this kind of text. They're very simple, and they show the language very clearly. In this case, it shows is, are very clearly. For a very low level, you have to show things which are simple and clear. So, how can you show this kind of language without it being so boring and non-communicative? Well, here's a very, very simple trick. Combine it with a picture. Now, it's the same text, but you have to deduce or guess which vehicle belongs to this person. And suddenly the text, which was so boring and non-communicative, has a purpose. Try matching. Try that. So what do you think? Number 2, hands up.
Number 1?
Number 1, hands up. Number 1. Any other?
It's not number 2.
4. It's not number 2.
We had number...
years old, that too expensive for €20.
This vehicle is expensive, is it?
First and the last. Okay, we had number 4 over here. The reason that, now she's divorced, she's got to have something to keep her company.
Ah, but parents are divorced.
Oh, so parents are divorced. Oh, yes, definitely.
So nobody no one the dog. She kept the dog.
Right, so maybe that's her and her parents' dog. Okay.
Yes.
So I declare number 2 the winner.
Yes.
Despite your misgivings. Number 2 is the winner by voting, by popular vote. I'll tell you a secret, there's no answer to this. So, the trick is, get together, just type in red cars in Google Images if you want red cars. Any colour will do, but red makes a nice harmony, doesn't it? Put them together, make your texts, and make this matching activity. You can do other matchings as well. You could have 5 different texts to go with the pictures, for example. They could be pictures of a room, somebody's room, or somebody's belongings, a building, whatever. Another one. So a simple matching activity as a way of contextualizing very simple, essentially boring texts and giving them meaning.